Hello human beings, PowerGamer here. Oh, right, that's my Final Fantasy alarm. It goes off whenever someone is required to play Final Fantasy. Still don't know why I installed that.
Final Fantasy, one of the most misleading titles since everybody poops. You've clearly never met a jellyfish, and you're clearly not last. I think most people know this game's history and the story behind its title, but for the few of you that don't, I'll give you the rundown. The game was developed by Squaresoft, or just Square as most people call it, a Japanese development studio who was on the verge of bankruptcy. I can't possibly imagine why. They were making some classic games like The Death Trap, Thexter, King's Knight. Okay, I could see where they were losing money. With seemingly nowhere else to turn, they decided to give in to an idea they had previously rejected. Developer Hironobu Sakaguchi had been wanting to make an RPG game for years, but Square kept shutting him down. However, after Dragon Quest proved to be a massive hit in Japan, they finally gave in and let him make it. At first it was tough to get staff members to agree, but he eventually assembled a team to join him, with the most important one being Akitoshi Kawazu, who based much of the battle system on Dungeons & Dragons. It was originally going to be called Fighting Fantasy, but that was already the name of a tabletop RPG, boy that sounds familiar, so they changed the title to Final Fantasy. And many theorized they went with that title because if it flopped, it would be Square's last game, or at least Sakaguchi's last game, but I don't think that's ever been officially confirmed. Either way, that didn't happen, as when the game was released on the Famicom on December 18th, 1987, it was a massive hit, saving the company from bankruptcy by selling 600,000 copies. However, due to how long it took to translate, it wouldn't be released for the NES in North America until May of 1990, and by that point the game had already gotten 2 sequels in Japan, plus it never released in Europe at all. But the North American release definitely helped, as the game had sold a grand total of 1.3 million copies by 1994, and at the time it was very well received, and nowadays people seem to remember it fondly, though most agree the sequels are better. Most. It would end up becoming one of the biggest RPG series ever, and unlike Dragon Quest, it exploded internationally. And Final Fantasy I would end up giving Mario and Sonic a run for their money in terms of re-releases, since this game has gotten tons of remakes over the years. The Wonder Swan, the PlayStation 1, the Game Boy Advance, the PlayStation Portable, and the recent Pixel Remaster, which is on PC, mobile, and now finally the PS4 and Switch.
My experience with Final Fantasy is very limited. I've been familiar with the series for a long time now, but the only game I've actually played is 6, which is one of my absolute favorite games of all time, but because these are RPGs, they take a very long time to play. But with the recent release of 16, I decided it was time I finally bite the bullet and play the original, which I've been meaning to do for quite some time now. Of course, since this game has gotten a lot of remakes over the years, the big question is, which version should I play? Well, the NES version is really janky, the PS1 version has some load time issues, the GBA version can be a bit pricey, and I do not own a PSP. So, I'll be going with the most convenient version of the game for me, which is the Pixel Remaster on the Switch.
The game opens with you needing to select 4 party members. You can name them whatever you want, or you can use one that's pre-generated, although none of them seem very appealing to me. You also have to choose a class for them, and you're given 6 options: Warrior, Thief, Monk, Black Mage, White Mage, and Red Mage. So, using the most creative names I could think of, and the classes that seemed the most interesting, this is the party I came up with. Aidan the Red Mage, gotta have that self-insert, Shane the Warrior, seems like a fitting name, Dan the Thief, always watch your back with a guy named that, and Peter the Black Mage. Tell me he doesn't look like a Peter. Once that's taken care of, we get our backstory. A kingdom has been plunged into darkness as the 4 elements of the planet, wind, water, earth, and fire, have gone haywire. The winds and earth are dying, and the seas and flames are raging. However, there is a prophecy that 4 heroes are destined to save everyone, and those heroes come in the form of the Warriors of Light, aka your party. They arrive in the kingdom of Cornelia, each of them carrying a small crystal that holds the power of one of the elements. They learn that a disgraced knight named Garland has kidnapped Princess Sarah, and the king requests the party members to save her. So after purchasing some equipment and washing their faces, the party set out into the overworld for some random battles. They travel northeast to the Chaos Shrine where Garland is holding Sarah, and kick his butt surprisingly easily. He doesn't really do anything. They return Sarah to the castle, and as thanks, the king orders the bridge north of them to be repaired, and then we get a genuinely really cool moment that shows your adventure has only just begun. The 4 warriors must fulfill their destiny by traveling around the world and using their small crystals to restore the giant elemental ones to their former glory.
Yes, the story is quite simple. You can't really expect much from an NES game, but for the first entry in the series, I think it does a solid job.
It really makes you feel like you're on a grand adventure, and while the main heroes never really speak, they just kinda nod, you do meet a plethora of unique characters and come across a vast variety of locations along the way, and it's really fun seeing all the different scenarios you can get into. The original game was really impressive looking for the NES. Obviously it's dated, but the sprites are surprisingly really detailed, and the battle animations look great. And just look at some of these monsters. I am amazed the NES was able to handle sprites this complex. And the soundtrack is fantastic. There aren't that many songs, but they are all great. From the main main battle theme, to the shop music, to that iconic victory jingle. Composer Nobuo Uematsu absolutely killed it. In my eyes, the holy trio of Japanese video game composers are Koji Kondo, Yoko Shimomura, and Nobuo Uematsu, and playing this game, you can easily see why. Now, the Pixel Remaster, oh my god, this game looks great. I love the way this game looks. The pixel art is absolutely gorgeous. The spell animations are so dang cool. Look at that. And the remastered music. Oh, it is heavenly. It sounds so freaking good and proves how awesome this game's soundtrack was even back on the original. Just listen to some of these. They even added some brand new songs that weren't in the original.
The Pixel Remaster absolutely nails the presentation, but yeah, that's enough of that. How does the game actually play?
Well, much like Dragon Quest, the game is a turn-based RPG. You travel around talking to people, and while exploring the overworld, you can fight monsters to gain experience. When you enter battle, you can attack, use an item, cast a spell if you know one, defend yourself, or try to run away. But there are two key differences between this and Dragon Quest. One is the perspective. Dragon Quest was in first person, so you never actually saw your character fighting, and animations were super basic. Here, you are fully visible the entire time, and you can actually see your characters swing their swords, cast magic, and get absolutely murdered. Ow. And the second is, as stated before, you control 4 party members at once. In Dragon Quest, it was just one dude, and he was as basic as possible. Here, the variety of characters not only makes you more prepared to fight things, but it also adds new abilities. Whichever classes you choose in the beginning determines the character's stats and powers. Each character has 6 inherent stats: health, strength, intelligence, stamina, agility, and luck. Health is how much life they have, strength determines how much damage they do, stamina is how much they can take, intelligence determines how strong their magic is, agility determines when they move, and luck changes the chance of escaping. There's also attack and defense, but that's primarily determined by your weapons and armor. Every character can equip 5 items: a weapon, a shield, gloves, a headpiece, and body armor. This affects your attack and defense, but it also affects accuracy and evasion, which determine whether you land or avoid attacks. Honestly, it doesn't really change that much, just use whichever ones are strongest. A character's class also determines what gear they can equip. The warrior, or fighter in the original, is probably the best in the game. It has the most health, high attack and defense, competent agility, and it can use almost every type of equipment in the game. It's by far the most commonly used class, and will likely be doing most of the physical attacks. The thief is more speed-oriented. It's slightly weaker than the warrior and can't equip as much gear, but it's a bit faster and has the highest luck stat in the game. The monk, or black belt in the original, is brute force. It starts out really weak, but it grows tremendously as you progress, and it can fight with just its bare hands. It's a glass cannon though, since it has nowhere near as much health or defense as the warrior and thief. And then we have the 3 mages, which are your magic users. The black mage is super frail and has the lowest attack stat in the game, but it makes up for that with its intelligence. It specializes in black magic, which are spells that do damage, and if you use it correctly, it can decimate almost everything. You can also use it to buff offensive stats and cause status conditions, but I rarely use those since they almost always miss. And maybe it's just me, but I find the original sprite absolutely adorable. He just looks so cuddly. The white mage is the exact opposite. It's still super frail, but has much higher attack and specializes in white magic, which are spells that heal and protect the party. And finally is the red mage, which is the jack of all trades. Its strength is on par with the thief, and it specializes in both black and white magic, so it can either assist one mage or serve as one you don't have. But the catch is that its intelligence is much lower, so its spells aren't as good, and there are some spells it just flat out can't learn. It also has barely any health in the beginning, so be prepared to heal it a lot. Especially since for some reason, enemies seem to have it out for them. My red mage got hit way more times than my other party members. I guess that's what I get for naming him after myself. I do still love the hat though.
The classes not only help this game stand out, but it adds a lot of replay value since using different classes can make each playthrough unique, which helps since the exploration aspect of this game is really basic.
95% of this game's story is just a bunch of fetch quests. Progressing through the story pretty much consists of wandering around the overworld, looking for towns, talking to everyone you see to figure out where you're going, and then eventually making your way to a dungeon. Thankfully, this game isn't very cryptic, so if you pay attention to what people say, you should have a decent idea of where you're going. I did get lost a couple of times, but I was eventually able to figure it out. There were only 1 or 2 times where I actually needed a guide. And while you're moving, you'll have a bunch of random encounters. These encounters can range from one enemy you kill instantly to a bunch of enemies that take eons to get rid of. During battles, you select each character's actions and then watch them them play out. When each person goes is determined by their agility stat, although sometimes it seems completely random. And I guarantee enemies have a higher priority just to waste your time. Sometimes you'll get a preemptive strike where your party gets an extra turn, and sometimes you'll get ambushed and the monsters will get an extra turn. Enemies can also cause status conditions like poison, which causes you to take damage at the end of every turn and with every step you take in the overworld. Paralysis and sleep make you unable to move until it wears off, which almost never happens. Stone makes you completely immobile. Dark makes you less accurate, but it never really affected me. And slow means your character attacks less. Every status condition wears off after the battle, except for poison and stone, so those are the only ones you really need to worry about. But you get plenty of antidotes and gold needles to cure them. Exploring can get pretty exhausting, so if you run low on health or magic, you need to head back to a town and sleep at the inn. But if one of your party members dies, the inn is useless. You have to go to a clinic in order to revive them. Okay, this is just stupid. Why can't I completely heal in one spot? This just wastes money and means I have to keep making extra stops. You can buy potions to restore your health, as well as tents and cottages, which fully restore your health and magic, but those things get insanely expensive.
But the inns and clinics aren't the only thing you find in town.
Towns also have shops where you can buy items, weapons, and armor, as well as wizard huts where you can learn magic. And the magic system is easily my least favorite thing about this game. Most RPGs use magic points, where using spells costs a set number of MP, and once you run out, you can't use magic anymore, and you use things like ethers and elixirs to restore them. Simple as that. Final Fantasy decides to be unique with these things called spell charges. How it works is each spell is placed under a certain level determined by how powerful it is, and typically the higher level, the more money it costs to learn. You can only learn 3 spells of each level, and if you want to change it, you have to forget one. Kinda like learning moves in Pokemon. Using a spell costs exactly 1 spell charge from that level, and once that level runs out, you can't use any of those spells until you restore them. I really do not like this system. It might not sound that bad, but it severely limits the amount of spells you can use, especially with the red mage, since if you keep needing to use healing spells, you might not be able to use damaging spells in battle. Or if you want to buff your party stats or save certain spells for emergencies and boss fights, you can't use any of the spells on the same level. You can buy ethers to restore them, but you don't have the option to restore all of one level. Your only option is to restore 1 to each level, so it can feel pretty wasteful. But what pisses me off the most about this system is they got rid of it for the GBA and PSP versions. So why did they bring it back for the Pixel Remaster? To be more faithful? The system is just dumb. I'm really glad they got rid of it for later games.
The Pixel Remaster really dropped the ball in this area, but thankfully it more than makes up for that with a lot, and I mean a lot, of quality of life improvements.
For starters, the original Final Fantasy is a broken mess. The NES version of this game is almost as broken as Pokemon Red and Blue, maybe even more. Some of the spells and equipment just flat out don't work. Spells that are supposed to lower enemy evasion actually raise it. The intelligence stat doesn't scale, so your early spells do the same amount of damage at the end of the game as they did in the beginning. And worst of all, the agility stat doesn't actually do anything, so the Thief is by far the worst class in the game. Thankfully, all of that has since been fixed. Aside from that, the remaster added some things that are just nice. You can quick save at any time, and the game auto-saves every time you enter a room, which is great because you can normally only save in the overworld, so in the original, if you died, you had to start the whole dungeon all over again. You can walk diagonally, which can save some time, especially in the overworld. The original game didn't have Phoenix Down, so you could only revive characters with clinics or the life spell. Jesus Christ, I'm never playing the original. If you selected an enemy with multiple characters, but it dies before all of them hit it, the other character's attacks are ineffective, so it does nothing but waste time. There's an auto battle feature, which can really speed things up, but without a doubt, the most wonderful thing the Pixel Remaster lets you do is you can turn off random encounters. I repeat, you can turn off random encounters. This is amazing. As much as I love RPGs, I think random encounters are insanely annoying. I get why they're there, but it's sometimes I don't want to deal with them. I just want to get a move on. And since it's so simple, you can leave them on when you want to grab some experience so you're prepared for the boss, and then shut them off when you just want to look around. Though you don't really need to fight them that much, since the boss fights are actually really easy. The random encounters are the real challenge in the dungeons.
And if you think this makes the game too easy, I don't care. This easily saved me a few hours while playing this game, and I am completely okay with that.
The dungeons in this game are fairly basic. Even without the random encounters, there's a bunch of enemies you have to fight by talking to these guys, and the Pixel Remaster has enemies in chests, which I believe were not in the original. Chests are the main reason you need to explore the dungeons, since they hold weapons, some mandatory items, and tons of money. Cash should rarely be an issue in this game, both from these and selling excess items you don't need. Progressing through this game was actually very comfortable. Aside from a couple of moments where I needed money or to top off my level, I didn't really need to grind outside of the opening area. Granted, part of that was probably turning off encounters, but if you're gonna give me that option, I'm clearly gonna use it. And hey, Pokemon and Dragon Quest both gave you an item and spell to do the same thing, so that's all the more reason to use it.
Like I said earlier, going through the story is really simple since it's mostly just talking to people and finding stuff.
After crossing the bridge, you find Matoya's cave, which is home to a witch named Matoya who can't see. Then head to the town of Provoca, which has apparently been taken over by pirates. You then have to fight them, and when you win, the captain vows to change his ways and even offers you a boat. Well, that sure is some quick character development. The boat allows you to travel across water, but you can only enter and exit in ports. Head southwest and arrive in the kingdom of Elfheim, which is home to the elves. You discover the elven prince has been cast into an eternal slumber by the evil wizard Astos. You then have to go to the marsh cave, which is filled with bats, and check all these rooms with chests in them. The most important one is this one with these 4 wizard guys that do way more damage than they should. Kill them, and you find this crown, which you then have to take to this ruined castle known as the Western Keep. Here you find Astos, who tries to steal the crown, and we have our first real boss fight. He instantly killed Aidan with a death spell, and then just kept casting haste, so I won pretty easily. Killing him gives you the crystal eye, which you take to Matoya, and in exchange she gives you the Jolt tonic. Take the tonic back to Elfheim, and you can awaken sleeping homely. As thanks, he gives you the mystic key, which lets you open locked doors. Now you have to head north to Mount Dwagar, which is home to the dwarves. They appear to be trapped due to a cave-in, so you need to go back to Cornelia Castle and open this room to find nitro powder. Bring it back to the dwarves, and they unleash an explosion so powerful it rips apart the freaking continent. We can pass through the newly opened canal and find the village of Melmont, which has been completely decimated by vampires. If you go west, you can find the Giant's Tunnel, but he gives you the Gandalf treatment, and if you head south, you reach the Cavern of Earth, which is filled with these earth spirits that hit like a truck. When you reach the end, you fight the vampire, he literally didn't hit me once, and get this phantom ruby. Bring the ruby to the giant, and he'll let you through. Now you can reach the Sage's Cave, and he'll tell you that to restore the land to its former glory, you must restore the Earth Crystal. He then gives you the Earth Rod, and you have to go back to the cavern.
Yeah, there's a lot of backtracking in this game, get used to it.
Go through it again, but this time use the rod to access 2 new floors. At the bottom, you find the crystal, and its power is being sapped by the Lich, one of the 4 elemental fiends. He doesn't really do anything special, he just uses some really powerful spells, so you want to be careful. After you kill him, the warriors purify the Earth Crystal. Then wander around for 20 minutes because the game gives you no instruction, and eventually you'll find the Crescent Lake where you meet Lucan, the guy who made up the prophecy about you, as well as the 12 sages. Here we learn that the 4 elemental fiends attacked hundreds of years ago and fell into slumber. Now they've been slowly reawakening one by one. The sages tell you to return to them when all 4 crystals have been restored, and then by defeating the Lich, you've awakened Merilith prematurely. They give you a canoe, which is slower and can only be used in rivers, and you reach Mount Golg, a volcano that's filled with lava that hurts you every time you step on it, so you're gonna need a lot of healing items. This place has a bunch of fire elementals, just like the earth ones from last time, and a bunch of these red dragons. Crap, they hurt. At the end, you find Merilith, and she mostly just spams fire magic. Honestly, not too much harder than the last fight, as long as you don't get screwed with her spamming fire up. Purify the fire crystal, and now we switch elements by heading to the Cavern of Ice. This dungeon stinks. It's filled with enemies that do absurd amounts of damage, like these ice dragons, and booby traps where you fall through the floor and have to fight a giant horde. It doesn't even have a boss, it's just this evil eye that goes down in 2 hits, and when you kill him, you get the Levistone. Now, this dwarf said he was looking for one, so you should bring it to him, right? Nope, you have to stand in the middle of this desert, which lets you raise this airship.
This is one of the few moments I needed a guide, because as far as I can tell, the game says nothing about this.
But the airship is amazing. It makes the boat completely irrelevant. You avoid random encounters and can fly over anything, letting you explore the entire map, but you can only land on grass for some reason. You can't land in trees, sand, or even these slightly lighter things. What is this logic? But it's still great, because this really opens up the game. From this point on, you're free to do almost anything in any order you want. Getting the airship not only lets you reach the town of Gaia, where you learn a fairy was sold to the caravan, but it also lets you reach the Dragon Caves. Here you can speak with Bahamut the Dragon King, who will reward you if you prove your courage. You can do this by traveling to the Citadel of Trials, which is a giant maze that has you teleport all over the place. At the end, you find a rat's tail, and if you bring it back, Bahamut rewards you with a class upgrade. The warrior becomes a knight, the thief becomes a ninja, the monk becomes a master, the black mage becomes a black wizard, the white mage becomes a white wizard, and the red mage becomes a red wizard. This upgrade heavily increases your stats, lets you equip new items, and adds a bunch of new abilities to each character. The wizards all learn a bunch of new spells, the knight can learn white magic, and the ninja can learn black magic. They're obviously not as strong as the wizards, even when they were mages, but that's still pretty cool. The master doesn't get any magic though, it just gets more powerful. And while I do really like how the sprites actually look older, I think I prefer the look of the old ones. It's mainly the eyebrows, they look kinda weird. Now if we do some exploring, we can find this waterfall cavern, which is pretty basic, and has this warp cube at the end. That'll be important later. And we can reach the town of Onrak, where we learn that the Shrine of Water has sunk into the ocean, and now it's populated by mermaids who have been imprisoned. After some exploration, including finding the Mirage Tower, which you can't enter, you have to find the caravan in the desert, which is not visible on the map, and buy the ferry. Take the ferry back to Gaia, and she'll give you a special material called oxyale, which lets you breathe underwater. You can also find the town of Lufenia, but they speak their own language that you can't understand.
Every American traveling to another country.
Head back to Onrak, this girl will let you board the barrel submarine, I guess she was a ghost, and now we can go to the Sunken Shrine. This dungeon is also really annoying. It's insanely confusing to navigate and filled with dead ends. I'm telling you, this encounters off feature is a godsend. On the top floor, you find a bunch of mermaids and the Rosetta Stone, that's important, and on on the bottom floor, you find the Kraken. He can hit hard, but if you're prepared, he's really easy. Now purify the water crystal and take the Rosetta Stone to this guy in Marilith named Une, and he'll teach you to speak Lufic. Go back to Lufenia, and they'll tell you they're the descendants of the wind people who lived up in the sky, and some dude named Sid built your airship. One of them gives you this chime, and that allows you to enter the Mirage Tower. Make your way up, and having the warp cube allows you to transport yourself to the Flying Fortress.
I really feel bad for the people who came here first.
This place has some of the strongest encounters in the game, with the most notable being the war mech that I was not able to find. I also decided to do an experiment where I only healed each party member when they died until I got to the boss. Aidan required a lot, Dan died once, Peter died twice, and Shane was fine the whole way through, proving that the targeting system in this game is biased. If you look down here, we learn that the four elements seem to converge in the center of the world. At the top of the tower, you find the final fiend, known as Tiamat. He does some pretty nasty damage, but like all the other fiends, he's fine if you know what you're doing. You purify the wind crystal, take this adamantite you found to the dwarf to forge Excalibur, which only the knight can use, and learn from the sages that you must head to the center point of the world, which is back where it all began at the Chaos Shrine. Remember how I said the four fiends attacked from the past? You need to use this time portal to stop them. Go back in time to when the shrine was much bigger and fight through a bunch of monsters, including rematches with the four fiends. And at the end, you find the one responsible for it all. Remember him? It's Garland. After you beat him, the fiends sent him thousands of years into the past so he could then release them and send them into the future, creating a time loop. He then transforms into the ultimate demon known as Chaos. No, not him, it's actually spelled properly, and we have to destroy him.
Hey, remember how I said all the boss fights in this game were really easy? I should have kept my mouth shut.
This is the hardest fight in the game by a freaking mountain. Chaos has an absurd amount of health, resists most of your spells, has some of the most powerful magic in the game, and hits like a freaking bulldozer. I mean, I know it's the final boss, but jeez! You need to heal almost every single turn, and unless you have the best spells and equipment, you will barely hurt him at all. And you better hope he doesn't use Flare, the best spell in the game, since it's basically a scream nuke. Why couldn't that be this strong when I use it? And if he casts Haste, which doubles his attack power, you are screwed, because Jesus Christ! Any physical attack is instant death, no matter how much health you have. I'm really starting to wish I had picked a white mage, because the red mage can't learn the best healing spells. The only good strategy I could think of is max out Shane and Dan's power with temper and haste, and then spam this healing helm with Aidan and Peter. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention there's some items that let you use spells without needing to learn them or use spell charges. This is the only one I found useful, since it heals everyone. Just barely, but it's better than nothing. I spent over an hour on this bastard, but eventually, I finally killed him. After that, we get this very slow-moving text where, to summarize, the time loop was broken and peace was restored. The four heroes returned to the present, and despite their actions essentially being erased, they will forever live on in legends, somehow. And then we get the actual credits.
Game conquered. Final Fantasy holds up better than I thought it would. It's aged a bit and has some frustrating elements, but I still had a pretty fun time playing it. I wouldn't say this is the best starting point for the series, but if you're already a fan and want to see how it got started, I can definitely recommend giving it a shot, just not the original version. Literally any of the remasters will do. Or I suppose you could just play some Dungeons & Dragons to get a similar experience, but I'm not doing that. I have a reputation to uphold. To play D&D, you need to interact with other people, and I am what's known as a social outcast.